We jump back into Torah Aleph, V'siyata D'Shmaya, and we have been speaking yesterday about how a person can get to a level where their dibur is me'ir, when they're speaking diburim me'irim, that their words are illuminated words, and in that way that's able to bring them to tshuva, that's able to bring them to a state where they're being miyachid, or they're unifying HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence, yichudi ilah, yichudi tata. And the Rebbe said that the way that a person can do that is if they live a life of kavod, that they're trying to give the kavod to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and not for their own selves. So the Rebbe tells us that if you have kavod b'shleimus, then you have the pasuk in Tehillim that says kavod v'lo yidan. You have kavod v'lo yidan, and there's no silence, right? Meaning a mouth is able to speak. It's the opposite of what happened to, like we spoke about it yesterday, Levi bar Sisa, when we spoke about the pasuk, Sagru Pimai Dibru Begeyas. Their mouth is not closed, their mouth is open, and they're able to communicate properly, and they're able to speak, and they're able to express. That's kavod v'lo yidam. If you don't have that, so then you have kvad peh. Now how do you go from kavod to kvad? And the answer is that there's no vav. You take out the vav. And if the vav is missing, then we have kvad peh, as opposed to kavod v'lo yidam, as opposed to the capacity to speak very fluently and very directly and very clearly. So the Rebbe says that vav is shmir sabris. And the Rebbe tells us that shmir sabris in Yud Kei Vav Kei is the bottom of the letter vav, because Yisoid, which is the meat of the bris, is the concluding energy of all of the spheres that are coming down into Yisoid, which is from the standpoint of Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, and Hod, all coming down into the Bechina of Yisoid, which is Bayaz, by Oiz, by Tukva. It's the concentrated strength of the individual that's then going to be transmitted. And that is the aspect, like we learned, of the Tal Iris, of the 39 lights, that if you take the Yud and the Hey and the Vav, with all of its different letters and energies, and you spell out, right, or you calculate the Milui, the unfolding of those letters in the Milui of Aleph, where the Yud, Vav, Daled, the Hey is with an Aleph, the Vav is with Vav, Aleph, Vav. So those three letters then, when you expand them, are going to be Gematria 39. That's Tal Iris. And that's if a person is in the aspect of Shmir Sabris, which we're going to learn about now, that's Tal Iris. That fills their life with this dew of vitality. But if not, that Tal Iris can turn into Lamites, Malachas, and that's Oiz, right, which is this place of the bris, is Gematria 2 times Lamites. It's either Lamites Malachas, Chas v'Shalom, or it's Tal, Tchia, and it's a Tal of vitality. And if a person is in the state of Lamites Malachas, that turns into Lamites Malchus. Arba im Yakena, we learned yesterday at the very end, the 40 Malchus, which is 39, as Chazal tell us, Malchus is as a result of Allah Yosef. As a result of this, that a person does not have the aspect of Shmir Sabris in their life. They don't have the Vav inside the Kvad, which turns it into Kavod v'lo yidam. Instead, it's Kvad Peh, and their Torah is not able to illuminate their lives. Their Torah is nisgashem, it stays stuck, it becomes darkened, and it's the opposite of the energy that we're aiming for, to be people who are being miyachid, the yichudi ilah and the yichudi tata. Now here the Rebbe says, and I say, Ushmir Sabris yesh bo shnei b'chinais. Shmir Sabris has 2 aspects to it. Yesh mi shezivuga b'sheishes me'achal. There's one level of Shmir Sabris where a person is b'sheishes me'achal. It's a more frequent experience of togetherness, husband and wife, during the week as well. But even so, although it's generally more frequent, as we're going to see from the higher madrega, which we'll talk about in a minute, the Shmir Sabris is Alpi Torah, She'eni Yotzei Midinei Torah, that the person doesn't go out of the Geder, go out of the guideline of Dinei HaTorah. And we extended this yesterday to say every person in accordance with what they're trying and with what their efforts are, because there's nobody who's perfect. And in the moments that a person is genuinely striving to keep the Dinei HaTorah in this area, in those moments there's Shomer Abris, because there's nobody who's perfect. That's the Bechina of Shmir Sabris, right? And we learned, I mentioned yesterday Mishnah Berurah, and afterwards I looked it up. It's Aleph and Mishnah Berurah right in the beginning, Siman Aleph, and the Ice Yud Beis in the Mishnah Berurah, where he writes very clearly, and I posted it to my status just because I was sending it to somebody, to Ramendi afterwards, because he was the one who asked the question, that he says, by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what's the Lashon? Let's see if it's still up there, 1 second. He says that, Ki akol talui lifnei Hashem im oisa kol asher bekoichoi lasos. That's what the Mishnah Berurah comments on Echad HaMarba ve'Echad HaMamit. He applies it to both davening. Over there, speaking about extra tefillas and makashos, obviously what you have to daven, you have to daven. But he says over there, he's talking about the extra things, and he's talking about Limud Torah, Echad HaMarba ve'Echad HaMamit, right? It's every person, Akol Talei, if a person's doing Lefi Koichai. That's how Kadosh Baruch Hu sees it. Hashem doesn't need perfection. He has angels. What he needs is people who are genuinely, authentically working on themselves. And every person will know for themselves if they're doing what they ought to do to make sure that they're in the right way in this regard. But this is the lower level of ideal, where the Shmir Sabris is is around this experience, right, of togetherness, husband and wife, during the week as well, during the weekdays. She'ini yotzei b'dinei HaTorah. But then there's a higher madriga. V'yesh mishu shomer abris shesivugay mishabes l'shabes. By the tzaddikim, their togetherness with their wife was only going to be on Shabbos, right? We know that Friday night, as we're going to learn, right, is Vishamru B'nei Yisrael Es HaShabbos, Rosh Hashanah is Bia, right? It's a reference to relations, that this is specifically on Shabbos Kodesh, when they would draw down Neshamas Kodesh as particularly holy souls, and make very, very lofty yichudim through the experience of Zivug that was on Shabbos as opposed to during the week, and that's just Shabbos to Shabbos. And of course, for us today, because the consideration is not just one person, right, but it's the Bechina of Aina, which is something that Al Pi Ksuba, that the Isha is entitled to. It's a right of hers. So obviously, this is not, a person cannot just, jump to this madriga and say, okay, this is what we're doing now. Obviously, you need to consult your trusted authority, and to discuss this. This is not something, that a person can just choose to align themselves with. And it's not necessarily true that it's relevant for every single person and for every person's madrega. Every person has to be honest with themselves. Probably best not to sit in this place, because thank you so much. Just right. So that's not for a person's choice, right? And that's something that needs to be decided. V'chule. Obviously, shalom bayis is always comes first, and that's the ikar shmir sabris. If we don't have shalom bayis, so then that's the biggest kilkul bris in the world, because bris is more than just this particular instantiation of bris. Bris means covenant, and there's shmiras bris across the board, both between us and Hashem, and many other areas than this, and there's shmiras bris between oneself and one's wife, and oneself and others, when we guard that covenant, when we guard that connection. Okay. Just, PSA. And this is the aspect, says Rebbe Nachman, of the upper unity and the lower unity. Because the lower unity is during the 6 days of the week, as we're going to see, Be'ezus Hashem, and we discussed that lower unity is hinted to in Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusai, where there is a world, and that world is infused with Elokus. And that's related to the 6 days of the week, which are the days of creation, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu's creative energy unfolds through the act of creation. That's Yichud Tata. And Yichud Ilah is from Shabbos to Shabbos. And on that aspect, HaKadosh Baruch Hu rests, and it's a Geulah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu beyond creation. And that's the aspect of Yichud Ilah, where not that there is a world, but Hashem is revealed within it, but there's an even higher madrega, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if you don't mind, just, right? So where there's a higher madriga, thank you so much, welcome, thanks for coming. There's a higher madriga where a person's able to reveal the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, beyond creation. And that's Shabbos Me'ein Olam Haba, which is a little bit of a taste of what the world, right, will look like when it's a complete and total revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's unity, not clothed or garbed within the 6 days of the week. And we said already that Shakai is the Bechina of Bris, Anikel Shakai Prei Revei. And we said that the Pegam of Bris is a Pegam, therefore, in Shakai. Because what does Shakai mean? We learned yesterday. She is Dai Be'elokusai L'kula Beria. Right? That there's enough Elokus to go around. What does it mean that a person's Pegam the Bris? That means that a person doesn't believe that it's Dai, what Elokus is deciding for me or for a particular person in that area. A person goes beyond the boundaries. A person's looking for more, right, than what they already have. That's really what the Bechina is. And that's why it's Yosef to Sitra Achra. It's not Yosef from the standpoint of Kol Makom Sha'at HaMotzei Geder Erva Shamat HaMotzei Kedusha, where the more that a person adds on a Geder Erva, the more holiness they add on. It can be the opposite, right? Where a person's looking to have experiences that fall outside the Geder of what Elokus has decided for that particular person with their limitations in this regard. And that's a Begam and Shakai. So now that we know that Shakai is the Bechina of Bris, says the Tzaddik, there is a Shakai Shal Shabbos and a Shakai of Chol, because the Rebbe is connecting now the Shmir Sabris of the week and the Shmir Sabris of Shabbos to Yichudi Ilah and Yichudi Tata, which is ultimately the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, is mizaveg with the world, right, on all the different levels, how the Or comes down into the Kalim, on all Madregas, right, all the spheres that are nishtalshal one into the other, right, that according to the system of the Ari, the Or of one Madrega becomes the vessel, right, of the next Madrega, and then Or, and then vessel, and so on and so forth, and this is how the process unfolds. This is all Zivugim. This is what we mean when we speak about Yichudim, the different names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that are Meir, that are shining down into one another. Ultimately, all of this, right, the Yichudi Ilah and the Yichudi Tata, in as much as the revelations in our consciousness, even though the Yichudi Ilah is completely beyond us, but at least we can fathom it, we can talk about it, right? We can draw a distinction between it and something else. It's a Bechina of Zivug. It's a Bechina of the Yichud between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and existence as we know it. One of those Yichudim is beyond creation. That's called Yichudi Ilah. Yichud, mamish like a Zivug, husband and wife. One is the Yichuda Tata. So now that we connected the 6 days of the week to the Yichudi Tata and the Shabbos Kodesh to the Yichudi Ilah, and we've said that there's a Bechina of Shmir Sabris of Shabbos and a Shmir Sabris of Sheishis Me'achol, so now we have a Shakai, right, of the Yemei Achol and a Shakai of Shabbos, a bris of the weekdays and a bris of Shabbos. So the Rebbe says this is the Bechina of Shakai Shal Shabbos Sha'amar Lo'olam Dai. Because really that word Shakai in Chazal has two implications. One is, like we mentioned, that she is dai ba'lekusa l'kula beria, and the second is, like we're mentioning now, Misha Amar la'olamai dai. And maybe it's the same thing, maybe it isn't the same thing, but it's presented slightly differently. Sha'amar la'olamai dai. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is creating and expanding the universe, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu said dai. This is all of creation. There's going to be 7 colors and not 8, right? There's going to be up and down and not some new direction. This is what there is. Sha'amar lo'ilamai dai. Shetzimtzim es atzmei mikol hamalachos. Where HaKadosh Baruch Hu constricted himself and he removed himself mikol hamalachos, from all labor, from all development and evolution of the world, which is very, very deep. And this is the aspect of the Yichudi Ilah. There's a way in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu is so beyond transcendent that he's removed from any act having to do with the physical creation of the world. He's completely mufga. The world is what the world is, and from Hashem's perspective, in that place, there's no interaction with the world. There's an annihilating, overwhelming, subsuming of that world. And so, Tzimtzei mikol hamalachos. And that level, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not engaged with bringing the world into being. The world is brought into being from our perspective. From that perspective, he's completely removed from all the malachas. So much so that from that perspective, there are no malachas, because there is no world, because there's just literally dai be'elukusa l'kula beria, right? And that's the depth of that. Where literally every single creation is just saturated with godliness. All there is Elokus. The kula beria is Elokus. That's Shakai. And that's Sha'amar lo'olamai dai. That's the aspect of the Yichudi Ilah. But v'yesh b'china Shakai shel chol. There's also the aspect of Shakai, which is Shmir Sabris, of the 6 days of the week. Shegam b'chol yesh tzimtzumim melacha. Because during the week there's also tzimtzumim. But over here, it's not a removal of godliness, or the transcendence of godliness beyond all acts that are unfolding in this world, just like it is on Shabbos, where kivoy shavas mikol malachtai. Over here, there are tzimtzumim mimalacha v'chaverta. There are distinctions within the continual unfolding of the world, where there's stage after stage after stage of development. There still is demarcation. There's a level of tzimtzum. There's a level of constriction, and which thereby, by the way, allows for there to be yichudim, right? Because one thing is what it is, and another thing is what it is, and then they're able to be miyachid one with the other, and that's the side which I've said in the past, and I say frequently, from the sefer Na'is Desha, the sefer on the Chumash from the Avnei Nezer, father of the Shemi Shmuel, where he writes, this is the secret of Havdalah. That on the one hand, Havdalah means to separate. On the other hand, we know from the Gemara that it means das Havdalah minayin. That if a person doesn't have the faculty of das, then you cannot have Havdalah. What's das? Das means to connect. He says that Avnei Nezer, which one is it? Right? Havdalah on the one hand means separation. On the other hand, it's associated with das, which means connection. Says the Avnei Nezer, no, it's exactly the same thing, because you cannot have Havdalah of das if you don't have Havdalah of separation. Otherwise, it's not yichud. You cannot have a zivug without two bodies, right? So you need to means that you need to separate one from the other and clearly demarcate, let's say, between Shabbos and the week, for the purpose that the spirit of Shabbos should then be able to infuse the week. Right? Meaning, because the ultimate thing of Havdalah is not that we want Shabbos to remain separate. We're trying to draw the energy of Shabbos into the week. Says the Avnei Nezer, beautiful. But in order to allow that to happen, Shabbos needs to be Shabbos, and the weekday needs to be the weekday. Once Shabbos is Shabbos, and the weekday is the weekday, then you can have a yichud between the two. And so over here we're speaking about yichudim that are the result of a distinction between one thing and the next, and one stage of development of the world and the next, but it's still the godliness that's within the world manifesting first as fire, then as water, which is its tzimtzum between the malachas, but showing up within the ma'aracha of the created world, as opposed to its tzimtzum mikol malachas, right? From Hashem's perspective, which is the Yichudi Ilah, where all there is godliness, and Hashem is separated fundamentally from every particle of physicality and every stage within existence. Over here, there's a Geulah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, both in the fire and in the water, and then it becomes barad, right? And so I'm just giving a mashal, or the male and the female, and then there's a yichud, but that's a yichud tata. You understand? Because that's a unification of the godliness within the world, that there's still a bechin of shakai, because you need tzimtzum. So that's the shakai, sha'amar la'olam I die, right? But it's within the olam, as opposed to beyond the olam. This is the difference between Yichudi Ilah and Yichud Tata. So he says, v'yesh b'china shakai shalchol. This is the Yichud Tata, the shakai, the Indian of Anikal Shakai, Prey Ureve, the Indian of Bris and Yichudim, Shachal of the 6 days of the week. Shagam Chal Yesh Tzimtzumim, Mimalacha Lechaverta. Like we just mentioned, within the days of the week, there are distinctions between what's created on day 1 and what's created on day 2, and there are different components of the world, each of which is reflecting the godliness, the chiyas that's bringing it into existence from our perspective, which is absolutely real, but there's godliness in it. That's Yichud Tata. V'zebechinas Matat. And this is the aspect of this incredibly mysterious archangel called Matat, or Matatron is the longer, more full name, who is also called the Sar Hapanim, and this is a singular malach that's formidable from the standpoint of all the malachim of Gabriel and Michal and this one and that one. And the malach Matat is this extraordinary malach, which is associated in the writings of the Vilna Gaon and the Mamshichet Derech of the Chochmah Shkla, which is very fascinating. Their whole sugya was around Matat and the Levi Yasan and the Indian of Tacht Sahar, which is essentially the structure through which HaKadosh Baruch Hu is like the technology and all technologies through which HaKadosh Baruch Hu operates, like the OS, like the operating system, which is something fundamentally separate from the electricity. We're using mishalim, right? It's way beyond any mashal that we could give, but it's some kind of operating system through which HaKadosh Baruch Hu is operating the world, right? And the Gemara says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sort of clothes himself in this matat, which again, we have to be very careful with this, very, very careful. It has no shlita on its own, is an eved, right? Is called an eved. It's a servant. It has no shlita. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu created a completely robust system that should serve as the operating system of Olam Hazeh, and Hashem is manhig himself, so to speak, in this operating system. Al-Pi Kabbalah, this is associated with the 6 spheros, with the letter Vav of Yud Kei Vav Kei, right, with the operating system of Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, with the Bati Din. That whole system taken as an algorithmic whole is the Malach Matat. Okay, there's just another word that we use for Matat, that we know Shesholtanuse Sheshis Me'achol, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world through Matat in the 6 days of the week, but not on Shabbos. On Shabbos, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is revealing Himself b'chvoida v'atzma. It's only during the 6 days of the week there's a hanhaga like this. Shabbos, you go out of the vav of Yud Kei Vav Kei and into the first hey of Yud Kei Vav Kei, and there's a yichud between the final hey, which is Malchus, which is Shabbos, the 7th day of the week, and between the first hey, which is Binah, which is Olam Haba, and that's why Shabbos is Me'ein Olam Haba. We're tasting from that level of Yichud Ilah. That's the whole thing. If you're privileged enough to have to say Raza de Shabbos, which people have the meaning to say with Mamalikin, some people in Nusach Sfard say Raza de Shabbos. That paragraph, Raza de Shabbos, that's the whole thing, right? Where the whole thing is a description of Yichud Ilah. Raza de Shabbos, Shabbos, that this is the secret of Shabbos. Raza de Echad, right? That the whole secret of what's happening on Shabbos is where during the 6 days of the week we have the illusion, and we live in the consciousness of an illusion of experiencing Elokus through Matat. Right, meaning through the way that this world unfolds, where this world is a reality, and we can find HaKadosh Baruch Hu sort of through the, meitzitz min hacharakim, like peering through the cracks of this system. But on Shabbos, it's like all of it dissolves, and there's the gilui that ein olam movada. That's Shabbos. That's the Yichud Ilah vis-a-vis the Yichud Tata. But the Yichud Tata of the Shakai of Chol, which is a Tzimtzum Mimulach al Chaverta, is the aspect of this Malach Matat, Shishul Tanusei Sheishis Me'achol, that the Shlita of Matat, which again, you have to be careful, is not the Shlita of Matat. It's only HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's nothing else, Ein Oid Movadai. And that always remains true. But in the 6 days of the week, he puts on this mask, or this cloak, or this garment, or this vessel of Matat, Bechinas, Shisha, Sidrei Mishnah, which are also associated because it's all the Vav of Yud Kei Vav Kei. It's associated with the 6 Shisha, the 6 Sidarim, the 6 orders of the Mishnah. Yes? Sheshmoi Keshem Rabbi, where Chazal tell us, on the words Kameshakasav Kishmi Bikirbai, as Rashi tells us over there, careful, watch, be careful of the covet of this angel, Kishmi Bikirbai, Shmoi Keshem Rabbi, right? Because he is the representative of the king, Kiviyachal, right? But he isn't divine. And this is a very, very, very important distinction to make, because the Christians, of course, jump on this. They love this concept of matat. This is their favorite concept, the Christians, right? Because to them, you see, it's in authentic scripture. That God is nislabish, is enclothing himself. Very, very dangerous, right? We're not talking about a singular human being. We're not talking about a human being at all, and we're not talking about this angel having any divinity on its own or any shlita on its own. Yeah.
Is there more to matat than just its name? Just an analogy. We can call Windows an operating system, but calling it Windows is not a single line of code. It's the code that matters.
Yes. There are very, very vast subtleties in this concept. There are many, many things that have been written about it. I can send you actually a brilliant, sometimes Nebuch, I shouldn't say, but you have to look in academia sometimes for really, good stuff. You have to know how to read it. But there's an excellent academic paper where they go through the whole sugya of matat. So I can send that to you if you're interested. But there are many svarim to look at, which go through the very delicate nuances, right, of why we are using, like every word I'm using, I don't make up. I'm seeing in svarim, right? So, but it's very specific. It's not just a window. It's very specific. And when we use the word technology, that's very important. And we have to understand that it is a mediating system, right? It isn't just a window. It has built into it the tech, right, to sort of mediate and filter down and reveal HaKadosh Baruch Hu's art to the world. But again, any mashal that we give in Olam Hazeh is always insufficient. Ein a mashal daim l'nimshal. And in a nimshal daim l'mashal, it's not the same. It's not the same. We do the best that we can with the words that we have, but the key point, and that's the differentiating factor between what we believe and what the Christians believe, is that literally everything else is ayin ve'efes klapei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And and now that we know that and we can ground ourselves in that truth, we can look at these Mamar Chazal. They're important for us to know, for example, because it tells us the difference between the Anhag of HaKadosh Baruch Hu during the 6 days of the week and the Anhag of HaKadosh Baruch Hu on Shabbos. It's all the Anhag of Hashem. But it has a nafka mina, it has a very specific repercussion has a negative connotation, a very significant impact on the way that we operate in our brain and on what level we're functioning on. Right? Is HaKadosh Baruch Hu running the world through a mask, right? Where there's a thing called history, and there's a thing called personal circumstances, and there's a thing called eating and drinking, and I recognize godliness in it, that's called Yichud Data? Or on Shabbos, do I rise into the place of recognizing that there is no mask, right? And really, it's just HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvod v'atzmai as a direct encounter with the divine, and that's true for every level of reality. These are two levels of consciousness, and a Jew needs both. A Jew needs, as we're going to see, how they manifest within Torah, okay? But it's very particular. It's not just an arbitrary mashal. Okay, and that's why Chazal is telling us, right? What is this? Kishmi bekirbai. So what does that mean? Kishmi bekirbai. All of this is going to fall into the cluster of Mamari Chazal about this fascinating concept and topic, which is very delicate and nuanced and perhaps dangerous and hazardous. But Chazal say, Torah hivalu manani tzarech kishmi bekirbai. V'zeh b'chinas yichud tata. Hainu sha'Kadosh Baruch Hu malbish es atzmai b'matat. Right, because it's not just the window. Otherwise, he would use the mashal. Right, Hashem is, matat is a window. Hashem is meir, malbish, very particular. Hashem encloses himself, kiviyachol, into this matat, b'sheishis me'achol umanhig ha'olam al yadai. And in the 6 days of the week, the world is being run through this technological interface, so to speak, of matat, that again is a purely created, non-vital life form that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created in order to run the world in that way. And then again, by extension, on Shabbos, that is stripped away, right, or overwhelmed, or however you want to say it, whatever mashal, and all there is the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, mamish, shining clearly, let's say, through the window, just like the sun, lahavdil, over here as a mashal. And when it comes to the Torah that we learned in Torah Yud, that the Torah has a lave, the bays of Bereshis, and the lamed of La'ini Kol Yisrael, and the Torah has yadayim and raglayim, the Torah has feet and hands, the Torah is a personality, and the Torah we learned has nigla and nister. Now we could understand more deeply what nigla and nister are associating with. And just by the way, for those who have been following along from the beginning, which Baruch Hashem all of us have, if you looked at the document, right, the cumulative flow, if you've read that through, that takes you from Torah to Torah to Torah, now we've sort of accumulated along this cumulative flow many concepts that align throughout the different lessons, right? So we've had, for example, this is the most prominent string of themes among them, I think that we mentioned it, we have Yediah and Bechira, right, like we started talking about in Ice Aleph. We have Igulim and Yosher, we have Nekuda Hila, the upper Nekuda Elyoina, the Nekuda Tachtoina of the Vav. We have Ratzeh and Shoy. We have Olam Hazeh, Olam Haba. We have Moshe and Yeshua. Right, all of these different themes. And then we got to Torah Yud, and we associated that structure of themes with Mordechai and Esther, right, with Yadayim and Raglayim, right, with that aspect of the upper and the lower. And over here, through the Nigla Nister connection to Yadayim Raglayim as it relates to Torah, we're now able to add Torah Yud Aleph to it. You see, it's just a string of code, really is. Right, so here we come to Halacha and Kabbalah, which all of a sudden in this association, if this is connected to the 6 days of the week in Shabbos, if this is also connected to the aspects of Shmir Sabris, all of this falls into that same structure. Each concept bringing a new Gilui, a new Yichud, a new revelation. So the Rebbe says this is the aspect of Halacha and Kabbalah. Obviously, Halacha is going to be, in this context, lower, even though in Torah Yud, Halacha was higher, if you remember, because in that Torah, we were not speaking about where the light reaches, we were speaking about where the light is rooted, right? And so because the light was rooted lower, it reaches higher. Because the light, like we said many times, is rooted higher, Memela, it's able to reach a nister. But over here we speak about the more simple terminology where Halacha is that which is lower, Kabbalah is that which is loftier. So in this context, Halacha is the Bechina of Yehuda Tata'a, and Kabbalah is going to be associated with the Yehuda Ilah. Kabbalah u'bechinas ishtach v'la shemad ras kodesh Rosh Tevis Kabbalah. The nister of the Torah, the Kabbalah, is the ICIs of and the Rosh Tevis of these words. Hishtach v'la Shem b'hadras kodesh. Bow down before HaKadosh Baruch Hu's glorious holiness. Hadras kodesh, His holy glory. That's Kabbalah. And Halacha hu bechinas. Halacha is Rosh Tevis Hariu Lashem Kol Haaretz. Sing to HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kol Haaretz, all of the earth. What's the distinction between these two psukim just on a simple level? Right? The Rebbe says Rosh Tevis Halacha Kamuva beKavanas, as is brought already in the Kavanas Hari. What's the difference even before the Rebbe elaborates between these two things? So the level of Hishtachavaya is always bittel. Hishtachava is bittul. A person is totally mevatel themselves. That's by moedim. What we're doing when we bow down, we're completely mevatel ourselves before the splendor and the glory of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's a total nullification of self. Well, that sounds very much like Yichud Ilah, right? Where there is no world, right? Where we recognize all there is. It's not that I am a yesh, and in this experience of yesh, I'm interacting with godliness that manifests throughout the world, and I'm able to find it and connect to it. There's no yesh. That's bittul yesh. That's called hishtachvu. Hishtachvu Hashem, bahadras kodesh, nullified before the glory of the divine, the annihilating, overwhelming, nullifying revelation of the Ari and Sof. That's the bechina of Kabbalah. And then Hariul Hashem Kala Aretz is very different. That's the bechina of Yichud Tata, meaning there is a world, and not just a world, but there is an Aretz. Aretz is Malchus. Malchus is, that aspect of Gilui, of the bechina of Ani, the aspect of an ego, of a sense of identity. And from that place, sing to Hashem. Shout out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, real Hashem Kal Haaretz. But that's the aspect of halacha, because that's the aspect of Yichud Tata, where there is a world and we can find the Lukus in the world. Hishtach v'al Hashem b'adras kodesh is a bechin of Yichud Ilah. There's total nullification where a person goes into the consciousness where this is all an illusion and really everything is godliness. Ani Hashem lo shinisi, ata hu ad shaloi nivra olam, and atu mishin nivra olam. It's all the same. That's the bechin of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, as opposed to Baruch Shem. So the Rebbe speaks this out. Hishtach v'Hashem ba'adras kodesh, sing and bow down rather to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's holy glory and splendor. Zebechinis Yichud Ilah. This is the aspect of the Yichud Ilah, Hainu Zivik Shal Shabbos, and this is the level, the madrig of Kedusha, where a person, the 6 days of the week, is Shomer Abris Legamre, and they're completely removed from that physical experience, which is maybe the most intense and the most gashmi, let's say, of all physical, maybe the lowliest in a certain sense, from the standpoint of physicality, of all the physical experiences. A person's removed from that, and that's enabling them to live in a state of Yichud Ilah, in a Shabbostic consciousness the whole 6 days of the week. Zebechinas bris ilah. This is the lofty covenant. Shesham ikar shtachavaya, where over there you have the aspect of bowing down. Bebechinas vayavayu achi Yosef vayishtachavuloi. The brothers of Yosef came and they bowed down to him. Who is Yosef? We already learned. Yosef is the tzaddik, and the tzaddik is mandanat brisai, right? That's what a tzaddik is shmir sabris. So you see a connection to Yosef, which is shmir sabris, that's associated with what? With hishtach havaya, with bowing down. V'bechinas hadras kodesh, and Yosef a tzaddik is the bechina of holy splendor. Bechinas bechar shayrai hadarloi. It says about Yosef a tzaddik, he is the firstborn ox. Hadarloi, glory is to him. He's a glorified being. And so they came to Yosef and they bowed down. That's the bechina of Hishtach v'l Hashem, Bahadras Kodesh. Hadar is Yosef, that's Shmir Sabris. Hishtachavu is the bechina of, like it says, when they came and they bowed down to Yosef, but it's total bittul, total nullification. That's Yichud Ilah. And a real Hashem Kol Haaretz, Sebechinis Yichud Tata. This is the bechina of halacha. Hainu Zivug Shal Chol. This is the aspect of the Zivug, of the Yichud Tata of the 6 days of the week, Shubachinas Matat, which is the Bechina of Matat, which, like we said, 6 days of the week. The letter Vav Yud Ke Vav Ke, 6 orders of the Mishnah, which is where we get all of our halacha from. That's the aspect of Matat. Sheshultanuse Sheishis Me'achol Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. This is the aspect of the 6 orders of the Mishnah, which operate within the fact that there's a world, and now we have to know how to interact with the world. Mishnah recognizes the world, right? It recognizes that there's a world. There are 6 orders. There are Zra'im, there are Ma'adim, there are Nashim, there are Nezikin, right? There are things that have, there are Trumas, Taras, there's, Toma, there, all these things because there's a world, and the Mishnah teaches how to interact with the world. That's the Bechina V'Yichud Tata. That's the aspect of Matat. V'zeu hariu lashon trua v'zimra. This is hariu la'Hashem kol haaretz. So we already said aretz is the aspect of the fact that there is a world in Yichud Tata. But hariu is also a lashon of singing. Bebechinas miknaf haaretz zmir shamana, which is a pasuk that Rebbe Nachman had already brought, I believe, in Torah Ches and maybe even Torah Tes. From the edges of earth, we heard a song. Ki matat hu bechinas kanaf. Because matat is the aspect of kanaf, of a wing that encloses, a wing that covers the body of the bird. How do we know that in this context a wing means to cover? Because the pasuk says in Yeshayahu that la'asid lavai v'lo yikanaf oid ma'recha. Your master, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, will no longer be engarbed, will no longer be clothed, right? Will no longer be enclothed. It will be the total revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And in the Mefarshim over there, it's a reference to Matat. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will strip away this illusory, intermediate, so to speak, system through which HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, and all, which means, for our purposes, all of time, all of space. This illusion of the world will be stripped away, and v'lo yikanef oid merecha. So v'lo yikanef is when Hashem is not running the world through Matat. If He is, then it's yikanef. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is covered over. Yikanef is miknaf ha'aretz. What did we hear miknaf ha'aretz? Zmiris shemanu, says the Rebbe. Zmiris is hariyu, means to sing. Right, so that's a connection to Matat, because hariyu Hashem is a b'chin of Zmiris. Miknaf ha'aretz zmiris shemanu. You hear Zmiris from the kanaf. What's the kanaf? Matat. Because v'lai kanaf is to the stripping away of Matat. But if you don't have the word v'lai, so then you have Matat. Then you kanaf. Yikanef oid marecha ki boy mislabish HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'sheishes me'achal ki adua, because this that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is garbing Himself in Matat in the 6 days of the week, and all of that is going to be removed la'asid lavai, which is the bechina of the first hey of Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is the bechina of Olam Haba, and every single Shabbos, which is me'ein Olam Haba, gives us the capacity to already begin to taste a little inkling of what that world will look like when there's no malacha anymore, which we might actually be moving into in the next decade or so, or AI, and the Geulah of technology, which is mamish Matat, literally the tikkun of the Leviathan, without getting into that whole thing now. But that's literally what it is. It's the total rectification, like figuring out Olam Hazeh, and we might actually be moving into such a realm. Kipshutai mamish, like in the most literal level, like in our lifetime, which is, this is it. This is the final moments of history. Unbelievable to be living in these incredible, remarkable times. But accompaniment, Shabbos gives us the ability to taste. Ki'ilu kol malachtecha asuya. Ki'ilu, you don't have to interact with the world anymore. You can just focus on the meditative aspects of connecting to the panemius of everything, the panemius of other people, spending time with relationships, the panemius of our interactions with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, learning, davening, meditating, being mind blown over nature, seen, right, as not hiding HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but mamish revealing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's a Shabbos mindset. And that's the bechina of Olam Haba, where v'lo yikanef oid marecha. Now this is incredibly important. This is so deep, and you see it took us so long just to go through two paragraphs, because it's so dense, and it's so nuanced, and it's so delicate, and it's so difficult to present. It's so difficult to grasp. But this is extraordinary, because this that Rebbe Nachman is identifying HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Yichud Ilah and Yichud Tata with Kabbalah and Halacha is doing us an incredible service to help us define the relationship between halacha and Kabbalah, which many people completely misunderstand. Because many people who don't know anything think that Kabbalah exists within Yiddishkeit as a sort of independent, separate body of work. There's Jewish esoterica, there's mysticism, which you're free to take or leave, right? And there's the law, there's the nomos, in Greek, there's that's what they call the Torah, the law, the law. There are laws, and then there's also, the mystics came up with this mysticism, and it's a completely separate thing, and there could be no bigger shtus than this. There's no bigger evos, distortion, corruption, ignorance, amaratzus than this. Because it's, and you find Talmidei Chachamim, not just Amaratzim. You find people who don't know the first thing about the first thing. They don't know anything. This is the first thing to know. Halacha and Kabbalah are literally one system. They're two sides of the same coin. That Matat, which is Halacha, exists, is because there's an energy of Kudsha B'richu, right, that's shining down through Matat and revealing Himself Kiviyachol as the world in a way that we can interact with it from the standpoint of subjective identity and subjective experience, right, as an independent being, that I could interact with the world and find the godliness in it, only because there's the influence of Kabbalah manifesting through the framework of this world. Kabbalah becomes halacha. That's what halacha is. Halacha is Kabbalah materialized. There is no Kabbalah without halacha. It's the craziest thing. People are worried. People are going to start learning mysticism and they're going to remove themselves from halacha. Then yes, there's a possibility of learning it totally improperly and chas v'shalom. And we have heard of such things. That the Nefesh HaChaim sort of rails against this, and that's what the whole sefer Nefesh HaChaim is, especially in Prakim, Parak Dalet and Hey. But a person who's really connected with Kabbalah, it's not something separate from halacha. Lahepech. It enables the person to realize that the reason why halachas are the way they are is because mysticism is the way it is. And it's a total identification and an exact alignment with the Olam Yonim and the different spheres and the different energies and the different shemas. And that becomes Daled Minim. That's what Daled Minim are. So again, it isn't that there's this thing called Daled Minim, and now we have to find some esoteric mashal, to say, oh, there were 4 minim, okay, 4 letters Yud Kei Vav Kei. No. There are 4 letters Yud Kei Vav Kei. Right? When they manifest in the world at this particular time, in this particular way, they literally become the lulav, the esrog, the adasim, and the ravas. It is the code, right, beyond which, beyond halacha, or through which halacha is able to manifest. And that's something crucially important. There's an interconnected relationship between Kabbalah and halacha, where the same way HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yichud Ilah, utilizes this dimyan, right, of this framework, which is illusory, but from our perspective is mighty real, of Olam Hazeh, of Matat, of history and time, and every aspect of the physical world, in order to reveal His presence. Yichudat Hata, so too Kabbalah descends, and is nislabish in a system called halacha to enable us to interact with godliness vis-a-vis the items and the times and the stages and ages and different circumstances of our lived experience in Olam Hazeh. I hope this is clear. Yeah? Because look at the next line. The Rebbe says it clearly. V'zebechinas razin, the razin de razin. Says the Rebbe, this is what it means. Secrets and secrets of secrets. Says the Rebbe, razin hu bechinas halacha. So the Rebbe says, don't talk to me about law. Halacha is mysticism, right? Razin is halacha. Halacha is all mysteries. Halacha is Kabbalah. But then there's a razin de razin. Then there are the secrets that power the secrets, right? There are secrets, because all of halacha, even on the surface, is all mysticism. It's all spiritual energy. There's nothing pragmatic about it, even though it's very practical, but it's all mysticism. And then there's a razin de razin of bechinas hakabbalah. And here he says it in this line, hislabshus hakabbalah behalacha hu bechinas hanhagas hakadosh baruch hu b'sheishis emyachal. The enclothing of Kabbalah within halacha is the same concept of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's energy animating the 6 days of the week with everything that was created within them and all the times that are unfolding from day to day to day to day to day. To say it again, and this is really nogea l'maisa. In order for the world to function as an animated organism, which is matat, all of it, right? The whole organism, the entity, the framework, the code through which HaKadosh Baruch Hu is revealing His presence in the world. I'm sorry, we're over time. I'll just finish now. In order for it to function the way that it functions, it's only if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is animating it. Otherwise, it's an empty shell, right? Like we said, matat. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name is removed from him, like a Geulah, it's mamash like a Geulah. If you take the shame out or whatever it is that's animating it, it's dead. It's a clump of earth. Oh, not just a Geulah, actually me and us. Take the neshama out, dead. Right? And that's the way that it works in every ma'aracha. Somehow we think that we could have halacha without Kabbalah, and it's going to be alive. Dead. It will be dead. It will be absolutely tight, mace, dry, meaningless. It will be foolish. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is so kind that even a halacha that's dead is mamish alive, and it will sound, because there's a kusta de chiyusa, there's a little bit of havla de garment, there's a little bit of a reshimu of energy in there that maybe should be taishal shmabala shmar, like the Rav Chaim says. It's still shaking the whole world, and that's true. But relatively speaking, if it doesn't have the meaning behind it, the why behind it, the depth, the contemplative relational energy behind it, which is halacha, which is Kabbalah being mislabish through halacha, it's going to be guf b'li neshama. And now we can understand that in a much more existential sense. It isn't just guf b'li neshama or the name that's in the Geulah. It's literally talking about the world as a whole without HaKadosh Baruch Hu's energy animating it. Dead. Matat without rabbi. But if there's the hislabshus of Yud Kei Vav Kei and the Ein Or and the Ar Ein Sof in the system of Matat, wow, the world is alive and it flourishes and the seasons change without any human being having to think about it. There's not one human being that was doeg, that worried that maybe this year spring is not going to come. I was thinking about this the other day. Just everybody knows you can set your clock by it. All of a sudden the world comes to life. Somebody flicked a switch. People are blind. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mamish running the world. There's Hashem's energy is in the world, bringing trees back to life. All the scientists and all the most mighty, wealthy Elon Musks and everybody else in the world put all their money, and they couldn't get one tree, to shift the middle of winter and to start producing fruits. They couldn't. They just couldn't. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu's energy breathes, and it goes out, and it goes in, and in it comes into the world, and it flourishes, and everything comes to life, and the leaves are starting to bud, and the sun is rising earlier, and the whole nature is coming to life. Why? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in it. And that's Yichud Tata. Forget about Yichud Ilah, where all there is in Amavad. Now we're talking about Yichud Tata. So from our perspective, if we want our halachic experience to come to life, that it should be with vibrancy and vitality, we need to be accessing the ma'aracha of Kabbalah within it. And then it's a system that's alive, it's a guf, and it's a neshama. This is basics, this is like elementary, mamish. Especially in our generation where everybody's suffering so much from a Yiddishkeit that's stultified, that's robotic, that's orthoprax, that's institutionalized, that's cultural, that people don't feel connected to it, and they rap on and they rap off, and everybody's kvetching the whole time, right? That it's all just a show, and it's not. So what's the answer? The reason that happened is because we forsook the area of Torah that's supposed to be giving it vitality. We took the mask and we forgot what the mask is actually supposed to communicate. We took the vessel and we left the ar. We took the guf and we left the neshama. It's very basic. Says the Rebbe, Hislabshus hakabbalah bahalacha. If you bring Kabbalah back into halacha, this is the literal same thing, just relatively on this madrega of bechinas hanhagas hakadosh baruch Hu. B'sheishes yimei hachol, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's energy shining down through the system of nature, which alone will bring it to life. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help that we should be privileged enough with the Bechin of Shmir Sabris, whether it's during the weekday, whether it's on Shabbos, really making efforts in our madrega, on our level, to be shomer the bris, which is the aspect to bringing the vav back into our kavod, which then moves away from kvad ped to kavod of layidim, which then enables that our Torah should be meir to all the places that we need to do tshuva, and then we become walking examples of Yichud Ilah on Shabbos, Yichud Tatav 6 days of the week, an engagement with halacha that's bursting with the meaning and the why and the vitality of Kabbalah, and in so doing we bring the world closer to the time that's described by the Pasuk in Yeshayahu, which says V'lo yikanef Oid Ma'arecha, where we should have the complete Geulah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence. B'meher b'yameinu. Amen v'amen. Thank you so much. I'm sorry we didn't cover so much ground, but...
על כל נשימה שאני